Hello everyone, my name is Teresa Kassoon and I have been painting windows in the New York City metropolitan area for 30 years this year. And I've always had a lot of people stop by and ask me questions, so now I'm putting it on film. I'm going to teach you today a few of my tips and tricks for Thanksgiving window painting. So let's get started. What I'm going to start with today is I'm going to show you how I do a cornucopia. What I do is, my technique is that I draw everything out first in black. And the paint that I use is, hold on one second. The paint that I use is Basics, and I use Mars black. Don't use ivory black, don't use any other black. Mars is the one you want because it is the thickest and gives you the opaque line when you go over it. So I like to draw everything out first, and my style is that of, it works like stained glass. So the black opaque paint is like the leading in stained glass, and then I color it in. And so you can see the design from both inside the window, your home window, your business window, and outside. I always paint, I'd say 98% of the time I always paint inside a business window, not on the outside, because this is acrylic paint and it's non-toxic. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to go first is I'm going to show you how to paint a cornucopia. Now I've been doing them for a long time, so I kind of know how to paint them in my head, but I'm going to show you how I do it, how I approach it, so that you can paint a cornucopia on your window. It's a great way to decorate for Thanksgiving. So what I do is I have the Mars black, and then I have a cup of clear water, and I start with a round brush. I get these at any art supply store, and I put a little bit of water in the paint, in the Mars black. Now we don't want it to be thick at first. We want it to be thin as we draw, because if it's thin, then we can move it around. I also use a paper towel, and I make sure I wet the paper towel a little bit, and I go ahead and just kind of wipe the window with a little bit of wet paper towel. It just makes the paint slide easier. And then this is thinned out a little bit. So cornucopia, I'm going to go ahead and start drawing. Cornucopia has that little swirl on top. And again, I'm keeping it very light. See how it's still very transparent? And then it kind of comes down. And with the paper towel, I can move the lines around still. Nothing's set permanently. And then it usually has that big opening, and it's kind of a circle. So you want to really take it with almost just water in it and make a circle. But the cornucopia has that sort of wiggly edge to it. So while it's still wet, you can go over it and do that. Or you can take your paper towel and just kind of move it around like that. So I have it coming down. There we go. I kind of like how that looks. Cornucopias, so what I do when I'm looking for simple imagery like this is, I used to years ago go into the Five and Dimes, local drugstores, and look at the coloring books, and that helped me get ideas. But now, the computer, since the mid-90s, you can just Google something. I usually Google like graphic images of cornucopias. And you can be inspired by other people's work and make it your own. And so that's what I do. I get inspired or get some ideas doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and finish drawing this. What you want to do, the cornucopia has sort of these rhythmic lines. And I'm going ahead and making that. I want to keep this a little open. As we know, cornucopias have lots of fruits and vegetables, but let's go ahead and finish the actual cone part of it. So once I have the lines in and I like where they are, I go ahead and put more paint on it. So you notice I go from very thin, and then I go ahead and make them thicker. Because I'm pretty happy with this design, pretty happy with it. Bring those lines down. And then, as we know, oops, I kind of want to make this a little more even. It's a little too thick there, so I'm just going to wipe it out a little bit. You can still move it around. Even if it dries, you can wet it and move it around a little bit. And then a cornucopia, of course, then the lines come around. It's kind of fun to do it freehand. You don't have to worry if you make a little bit of a mistake. It's okay. There we go. They get smaller at the top. Then I'll go ahead and thicken this up here. Here we go. So I'm keeping this I want to keep this a little lighter because this is where we're going to put our food and our pumpkins, and you can add whatever you want. There's a few things that I really like to add that are very colorful once they're colored in. So of course, it's Thanksgiving, you're going to want the pumpkin. And again, you can take your wet paper towel. I know I go through a lot of paper towel. So I'm going to go ahead and just sort of wet the area that I want to draw in. It just makes it a little easier. And you know, pumpkins are kind of these oblong shapes. They're not quite a circle. And I go ahead and I take the paper towel and I work it a little bit. At the top, you know, the little pumpkin handle. That's how I make a pumpkin handle. And then, of course, the lines. And then you just draw in the lines. I'm keeping it all light because I'm still adding and moving things around. I also like to put in some grapes go really well. So grapes are pretty simple. Just make your little circles. In here you want to overlap, like in a real cornucopia. You can overlap it. And bunch all the circles together. I want to get a nice little bunch of grapes. There we go. Kind of like that. Coming out. Oh, see, you can get a little, you can just erase it if you're not happy with that circle. There we go. There we go. Oh, it's a little thick on the end there. Okay, that looks good. And grapes, of course, have some leaves. And for leaves, you can make it real simple like that. I go ahead and just put a few around there. And inside the cornucopia, another fun element are pears and apples. So a pear kind of has that shape like that. You can put a couple of pears. I can put one behind the other. You see, it's just kind of a little bit of a squiggly line there. And then, I'm going to add an apple like turned on its side. It looks like it's going to fit right in there. So an apple turned on its side like this, it's almost like a circle and a rectangle. And I'm erasing the cornucopia outline there because then it looks like it's falling out of the cornucopia. So I kind of go like that, and then another, you know, where the apple and the leaf on the apple. So again, I take the wet paper towel and I kind of just wipe out where I want to erase something. And I can add another apple over here. I'm going to add an apple right here. And this one will be standing up. And then I'll add the leaf. This always is kind of a nice little dynamic. A little leaf on the stem of each pear and each apple. Also, this is a fun little thing I like to add. Usually, if you want to add a little more, there's a highlight. You can add a little highlight on there. And we'll paint that in white when we're done with it. I like that. Also, what I like to do with this cornucopia is, it's nice that if you can leave a little bit open so you can see through it. So what I do is I make it like a border, kind of match it up a little bit. And the border comes around like that. You see how it's a little thick over here? I'm just going to go ahead and, it's still wet, so some of it's drying, that's okay. I'm just kind of opening it up a little more, defining the edges just a little bit more like that. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe I want to have a leaf coming out over here. I'll do a little leaf like that. And it can go over the pumpkin. This kind of anchors the piece on the window a little bit. Again, let's Do something a little different here. Oops, see, the paper towel eventually gets full of paint, and then you just get a new one. There we go. Just a little leaf over there. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go in and darken all the thinner lines. Okay, now that I filled everything in, makes a beautiful piece on your window. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add some leaves. And what fills out a window nicely for Thanksgiving is if you add leaves, and it makes it look like the leaves are falling outside. So since I've done this many times and I draw a lot, I can go ahead and this is how I do some of the simple leaves. I like to have them pair off sometimes where it looks like they're falling together, and have one come over here. This is just a simple leaf. Very easy to draw. Sometimes I put that in the middle. Again, it's thin. I'm going to go around and make it opaque once I get all the leaves on there. Sometimes I like to add all the different leaves that you see outside, especially here in New England. There's a lot of trees and there's a lot of different leaf shapes, and they're all really beautiful. This is a typical oak leaf. So I normally just draw out the middle line in a leaf, so because you want to keep the two sides symmetrical. So an oak leaf kind of is a little bit like this. It's a little wiggly like that, and you want to make it the same on the other side. Like that. That's kind of fun. If you practice, practice makes perfect. And again, if you don't like something, you have the paper towel and you can just wipe it out. I keep it nice and thin and transparent so it's easy to move it around. That makes a nice little oak leaf. You can add the lines. Sometimes I add the lines like this, those veins inside of a leaf. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just the color that you want and the shape. If you don't feel comfortable drawing your own leaves and you really want it to have a nice look to it, a more refined look, I have stencils that are available. You can download them and cut them out. What I like to do is I draw on like a file, so like a heavier cardstock than just regular paper. And what you can do is you can download some of the leaf patterns that I have and draw them on a file and then cut them out, and you'll have your own paper stock of leaves. So this one is a maple leaf. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm taking the Mars Black paint and I'm making it kind of very watered down so that it's loose. And I think I want to have a couple of these leaves up here. So you just place it on here and you go around the edge with your brush like that. Sometimes it's easier, like something like this with a maple leaf. Instead of just drawing the line, you can go around it. I can see it here, the edges. I can see them. You want to keep them jagged. You just want to get the gist of the leaf. So once you go around, there you go. Oh, the stem's kind of thick. So I'm going to wipe that off a little bit there and make it a thinner stem. Oop. There we go. Now I'll grab my paint again. And I like to make the stem of the leaf black like that. And then I'll go back around. Filling in the shape of the maple leaf. And the maple leaf, you can add the lines. It just gives it a different dynamic. I don't like to put too many lines in them because once we color it in, I want the color to shine through and not the lines in it to take over too much. So I think just looking at it now, I like how these are thin. This is a little too thick, so I'm going to thin that out. And just take it off altogether and make a new one, and just keep it thin. And so again, this paint is non-toxic. It's acrylic paint, and acrylic paint is basically liquid plastic, and it's non-toxic. So I don't wear gloves when I use this. I just get it all over my hands. Now, those of you who know me know that I'm an oil painter, and I always wear gloves because the oil paint is toxic, where this is not toxic at all. So here we are again, just going around. I think I'll add a maple leaf here. Let's add one over by the cornucopia. And I'll just go around. And this saves you time. I use stencils for Valentine's Day. I like to have a nice solid heart. I also like using stencils if I have an egg pattern for Easter. I like using stencils. It makes it all uniform and it gives it a really nice look. There's one there, and I'm going to add another one up in the corner. Coming this way. There we go. And I have the gist of it. And then I'll go back in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the rest of these leaves, and then we're going to do the color. Okay, I want to tell you about the paints a little more. There's one paint, the yellow. You don't want to use the yellow straight out of the tube. You want to mix it with a little bit of white because it's very transparent where all the other colors have an opaqueness to them. So you'll see what I mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some fall colors. I have a little bit of yellow in here, and I'm going to add a little more. I'm going to show you how I color in these leaves. So a little bit of yellow and a little bit of white. If I want something all yellow, I have a little bit of white to it. So on here, I'm trying to think, there's nothing that's really all yellow. Everything else is maybe a little orange, but I'll paint one of these leaves a little bit yellow here. And again, what I do is I use these brushes. Let me show you the brush that I use. To fill them in, I don't use the round, I use a flat. I use a flat brush like this, and you see how it's cut at an angle? It's easy to get into those corners and paint. So I really like these brushes. I think this one is about 1 inch, and some of them are a little larger, but they make a great fill-in brush. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a yellow one. When it comes to fall leaves, I like to add a lot of color. So what I'll do sometimes is I usually keep my paints in separate cups. These are the cups I get like in a 99-cent store. And when I'm doing the leaves, I like to mix the colors up a bit. So I'm going to add a little orange and a little yellow in this same cup. A little orange, oh, and a little red. A little orange, a little red. So I have red. I'm going to add a little bit of orange just down the side of the cup like this on one side. And got a little bit of the red. And put a little bit of the red. So this kind of mixes things up. And I sometimes work with several brushes. This one, I think I only need this brush, but I'm going to do a different color combination. I'm going to do orange and yellow. So see how this brush has a little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow. And this makes for a really fun color on some of these. And I'll go ahead and start up here. And leaves have a textured pattern. You see how I'm kind of wiggling it? Kind of gives a nice texture like a real leaf. And the orange and the yellow mix on there together. It's kind of fun to do it that way. I like doing that on the maple leaves. So I'll go ahead and put a little bit of orange. I have the yellow on there. I'll start like that. I'll come down, and you can go straight like this if you want, but to me it just adds a nice little texture to it when you wiggle it. And the colors are kind of mixing on there. Like a real leaf has these different shades of orange and yellow. I just add a little bit of red on the tip, and I'm going to go ahead and wiggle it down like that. Kind of looks like a real leaf, right? Has that gradation of colors. That's the unique part of it. I'm going to do it again on the other maple leaf. I'm going to go ahead and start with some yellow. And again, I'm using the same brush and the colors are kind of mixing on there, which is okay when you want to do a leaf like this. And I'm wiggling the brush again. I'm going to go mostly yellow over here. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that red, put it on the tip of my brush. And I kind of like, you know, in the fall when I notice the leaves on the ground, they have all different kinds of gradations in them. And you make your own. And each leaf looks different. I'm going to do the maple leaf down here. Add a little bit of the yellow. There we go. Some of that black is still wet. And I'm going to add a little bit of orange. I make a lot of it orange. And I'm wiggling it a little bit more. And I think I'm going to just a little bit of red on this side. It's kind of fun. You can make it any way you want. I'm going to go with a little bit different color pattern. I'm going to wipe my brush. If you want to keep the colors clean, you always rinse in between each color. But this one, during the fall and the fall leaves, we don't need to keep the brush as clean because we want the colors to blend on there. Okay, so the leaves also in the fall sometimes have a little, just a little bit of green to them. So what I like to do when I do the leaves with green, I don't like to keep them green. I like to use yellow, green, and a little bit of white with them. So I'm going to put a little bit of white in here with the green. And I'm going to keep the brushes separate. So the yellow and the red are on one brush and the white and the green are on the other. So let me show you what I do with this one. Half the brush has green on it, half of it has white on it. So I kind of dip it like that. It doesn't have to be exact. They can mix a little bit. And then I go ahead and wiggle it on here. It just adds a fun little texture to it, fun little color. It's like muted. Sometimes I do this. Sometimes I take the yellow one, and it does have traces of orange on it. And I take the yellow one, and I just do half of it. And then I'll take the green one with the green and white on it, and then just do the other side, like that. And then they start mixing on this brush. So I'll go a little bit like that, and I'll take this brush and put a little yellow. There we go. And they look like fall leaves. Oops, let's get this one down here. Let's get this one. So we got a little bit of yellow and a little bit of orange on this one. There we go. Maybe we'll add a little green on this one. I like to mix the green with the yellow, so I'll do a little wipe of yellow, and then I'll get that green in from the other side. There we go. And we got some green over here, so we'll add the green handle of the pumpkin and of the pear. Oh, pears are really fun too. So the pears can use the green and the white brush. And again, it's like a little lighter on top where the pear is starting to ripen. And I get a little more of the darker green below. There we go. Kind of blend them together while they're on the window. I can do the same thing to the other pear. You got a little bit of white, a little bit of green. And then this pear, I'm going to have a little more yellow to it. And it just blends together right on the window. Gives it those rich fall colors. Now I see the leaves around the grapes. I want to do that more just a green, like a leafy green. I'm going to do that. Here's the green leaf on there. And then, oh, we forgot the oak leaf up here. So the oak leaf, I'm going to add the yellow. This is my brush with a little bit of yellow and red on one end. And wiggle it down. And then I'm going to take the green one and just add a little green on that side. That's kind of fun. Next, the pumpkin. So the pumpkin, this is a fun way to do a pumpkin too. If you want to, you can paint it a solid orange. You can just go ahead and paint that orange like that. Or you can, lighten it up in the middle, add a little more yellow, give it a little depth. So some of the shading gives it just a little bit of depth. And then I'll go a little bit darker on the other side, like that. Okay. And so I need a little bit of red. And I'll wipe this off. And I'll do the red apples. There's a little bit of orange and yellow in here, and that's okay because the apples ripen. They can have a little bit of color gradient on it. It's fine. Still looks good. I'll get the other apple down here. And if you want, you can just use a clean brush. And this dripped a little bit. I'll get that off. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to get a little bit of purple for the grapes. Now I'm going to do the purple grapes. What I did is I have a purple and a white. This purple's really dark, so I'm taking the white and I'm mixing it a little bit. See how it's a little more purple? I like to mix the paint on here as well. It gives a little different dynamic. So you see I have the purple and the white. And I'm going to go ahead and just try to paint in the circle, the little circles. Don't worry about going over the black part. We're going to cover that up. We're going to go back over it to clean it up to have a nice clean look on the inside. We're going to do that. Add a little more white on top. It's still wet, so I'm kind of making it a little lighter on top. Don't forget to put your little white highlights in. There we go. And now I'm going to use a brown and a little bit of yellow to paint in the cornucopia. Final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in the cornucopia. And sometimes what I like to do, I like to leave this open, especially if it's a really large cornucopia in a business, because then you can see inside the business and people can see inside, you can see outside. Otherwise, you can fill this in if you want. I'm going to leave it open. So I'm going to color the border here and the rest of this cornucopia. I have a brown, I have a little bit of white, and I have some of that yellow left. And I like to keep the front end just a little bit of a dynamic, the front end lighter than the rest of it so it pops. I think the brown and the white work best. And I'm kind of giving it a little texture by going like this because it's sort of like a basket. And you know how baskets have texture on them. And your brush strokes can add texture. Now you don't want to go too much, so if I go a lot, right, I'll start making it wet, I'll start making it too wet underneath and I'll start ruining the drawing. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You got to kind of go fast. If you wait too long, you'll start melting the drawing underneath. I'm going to just go ahead and make the rest of this darker. I'm going over the line right now just to fill it in. It would be very tedious to go each one and be very careful. A lot of times when I'm working, I have to work fast because I try to do several businesses in one day. So to make it go a little faster, and you can make the brush stroke go different directions. It gives it some texture, some added looking texture to it. So I'm going to go like this and this. There you go. Just make sure you fill in all the open space. And again, it's okay to go over the black, but don't linger. Don't linger on the black drawing because it's getting wet again with this other paint on top of it. And it can easily move. That's the thing. This acrylic paint will stay and have a beautiful color and glow to it, but if you get it wet, it'll come off, which makes for an easy cleanup. So if no one really touches this and water doesn't get on it, it will last. I've had some customers with paintings on their windows for over 10 years. And the color is pretty much the same except for the red. The red fades a little more. But otherwise, all the other colors are pretty brilliant still. Right now, it doesn't look too messy, but when the light goes down and it's lighter inside and darker outside, you're going to see the paint merge over these lines. If you want to clean it up, this is my secret of how to clean it up. What I do is I take my black and I make sure I add a little bit of water to the black to make it, a little easy to glide along the work that's already there. So what I do is I take the black and the paintbrush and I go back over. And you want to go softly, gently, not to disturb the design because some of the color is still wet, but this cleans everything up so that you'll be able to see the design very clearly when it gets dark outside. You probably can see a little bit of it now as we get close up. See how I'm just cleaning up all those black lines that are underneath? That's going to make this painting look really nice when it's dark outside. Just sharpen up those edges. Last thing, how do I get this off the window? Easy. You need Windex or water. You don't even need Windex, you can just use water. But I have a bottle of Windex, paper towel, and one of these flat blades, like this. I'm only going to do these leaves because I'm going to leave this on my window. So you just get it wet, and you take your paper towel. I usually hold the paper towel underneath it, and you just shave it right off with this. So it just comes right off, just like that. 1, 2, 3. It's very easy. And there you have it. Beautiful Thanksgiving windows. Thank you so much for joining me today and learning how to paint Thanksgiving windows. Happy painting and happy Thanksgiving.